Hi everybody and welcome back to another episode of Inform Platform. Today I'm here with Dennis Fancett, the chairman of SENRUG. We're going to talk all things railways, the past and the future. So, hi Dennis, thanks for coming on the channel. I really appreciate this.
That's okay. I'm pleased to be here. Thank you.
So, my first question is, what is your earliest memory of the railways?
So, when I was a child, I was the youngest of seven children. My parents didn't have a car, so we used to go on holiday by train to camping coaches. And these were like rail coaches with sleeping accommodation. Those all run by British Rail in those days at seaside resorts. And I can remember going to some of those, both the train journey and actually staying in the coach. It's a bit like a caravan, but it's like on wheels, and they could chug it round from station to station during the winter. If they thought more people were going to this resort than that resort, they would move them around.
Well, it's funny because I was actually watching a friend of mine called Brian, and he's got a son called Tommy. They've got their own channel, and they're on holiday at the Sidings in York at the minute.
Right, okay, yeah. So there are still a few around in private ownership. But in those days, they were run by British Rail. And the big advantage was if you stayed in a camping coach, they gave you free travel to the coach. And if you got seven kids, I mean, that was like more than the cost of the holiday you were saving.
Yeah.
So that's what we used to do when we were kids.
You never know, Great British Railways coming back here.
Could do, could do.
So, as I mentioned before, you're the chairman of SENRUG. So, what does your role entail?
So my role really includes liaison with the stakeholders, which are typically the train companies and local authorities such as Northumberland County Council or the Mayor's Office or the North East um, Combined Authority. So both people working for the council and councillors, and I also talk to MPs, and very occasionally I get to meet the Secretary of State for Transport. So that's happened five or six times. Um, Never the same person twice. They never seem to stay in post much longer after meeting me. Although I certainly hope there's no kind of pattern or to that, and that's just coincidence.
So, what would you say your biggest achievement as chairman is?
So the biggest achievement is definitely the opening of the Northumberland line. It's not the only thing we've campaigned for. There's earlier things we've got, such as cross-country train stopping at Morpeth and level access at various stations and kind of minor improvements to the timetable, Sunday services, evening services, that kind of thing. The Transpennine Express service between Newcastle and Berwick, all of these things have been negotiated by SENRUG. But I think our biggest achievement is to see the Northumberland line open and carrying passengers way in excess of forecast. So, yeah.
So, following on from that, what do you think needs to come next after the Northumberland line? Is it additional stations on the route or other
So
projects?
there's lots of things. First of all, we want to see the Northumberland line extended to New Biggin. That was always part of our plan. That just wasn't included in the business case, which was eventually passed by the government. So Ashington, new station at Woodhorn by Woodhorn Colliery, by the Museum of Mining and Northumberland Life, and then a station at New Biggin. We want to see the Newcastle Morpeth trains extended on to Bedlington. We want to see some double tracking on the Northumberland line. We want to see a new station at Seghill. And then nothing to do with the Northumberland line, but we're also campaigning for a local service between Newcastle and Edinburgh, which will stop at every single station along the line. So we're talking about Pegswood, Widrington, Acklington, Chathill, new station at Belford, running every hour. So there's lots of other things. And then there's kind of fares issues like Cramlington and Morpeth need to be included in the metro zonal system, same as Ashington is, and the airport bus to Morpeth needs to go to Morpeth station. So if I stop to write all these things down, it actually becomes quite a long list.
So, talking about looking at the future, why should the younger generation, such as my generation, care about the future of the railways?
Do you have a car, Nathan?
No, I don't.
You don't.
Learn it, hope, saving up to learn,
Yeah,
but not
and
yet.
well, so that's the things. There's the cost of driving lessons, which is a lot. Then there's the cost of the car itself, and actually that's probably not the highest thing. And then there's the cost of insurance. So a lot of our campaigning is based around getting to work. We don't try to pretend that families don't have a car. We've never said that, but we do say that in particular family units or households, there's often more people trying to get to work than there are cars available. And young people in particular, the cost of driving is very expensive, and young people, uh, I think, need increasingly to rely on public transport. And in inner cities, it becomes viable actually not to have a car, just to zip around with a kind of an annual card, and which covers buses and trains and metros and things. And I want to see services sufficiently frequent to make that a viable lifestyle for people in Northumberland.
So, what's your opinion on Northern getting rid of the through services between Morpeth and Carlisle?
Well, I don't think it was necessary. They've kind of blamed it on the new East Coast Main Line timetable, but it's really nothing to do with that because there's a dive under at the south side of the King Edward Bridge. So trains can get from the Morpeth line on platforms, whatever it is, 5, 6, 7, or 8 at Newcastle underneath the main running lines. And again, it's a real problem for people wanting to go to work by train if you work in Metro Centre or something like that. Plus, it disconnects two of Northumberland's market towns, Morpeth and Hexham. So I think it's a very retrograde step. And as soon as this new timetable will settle down, we'll be looking to campaign for it to be reintroduced.
This might be a silly question from me, but is there not the opportunity to route them over the high level bridge and back round the other way?
Yeah, there's lots of ways it could be done. I think that's they could reverse out, and sort of
Because if you bring that into platforms, let's say 5, 6, 7, 8, then reverse it back over the bridge, that's not taking
yeah.
any space on
So
the East Coast
the
Main
so the stated issue that it's part of the new East Coast Main Line timetable revamp is not the issue. The real issue is if a train coming from Carlisle gets delayed,
Line. Right.
then it kind of loses its slot. And what they've tended to do is cancel it from Newcastle on, so it can just sort of go back to Carlisle. But there are other ways of solving that problem. I mean, for instance, if the delay is more than 20 or 30 minutes or something, you could have a spare unit at Newcastle because they always change crew at Newcastle anyway. So
Yeah.
you could actually start an empty train from Newcastle to cover the gap. And that's what cross country do actually. You'll often find, well, not often, that's a bit unfair, but there's been once or twice when I've been at Morpeth Station and you've seen bizarre displays on the CIS saying something like, 11:18 to Edinburgh cancelled, and then the next train is 11:18 to Edinburgh on time. And what that means is there's a train coming up from Bristol somewhere, which has typically got stuck at Birmingham. So they've cancelled it. They've said, well, that train won't go any further than York or Newcastle, but they've started a replacement train. It just doesn't reflect very well on how it's described on the CIS. What they're really trying to say is if you're meeting Granny off the train from Bristol, she ain't going to be on it because it's a different train. But if you're worried about catching your flight at Edinburgh Airport, you're okay because the train is coming in at the time you expect. And Northern could do that. yes, it does mean holding a unit spare at Newcastle, but they should be able to do that.
They normally have got units at spare, and I have seen that once before. I was at Newcastle the day. Do you know when the trespasser was round Heaton Depot?
I don't know about that
That was
incident.
a couple of months back, and cross country they brought a train from Edinburgh in, cancelled that at Newcastle and sent it back up, and the one that was coming up terminated at Newcastle and went straight back down.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, they can do that sort of thing.
So following on from that, as you mentioned before, you want the hourly service. Could this opportunity, instead of terming obviously the trains coming from Watford to Newcastle, could that give them the chance to go all the way up to Berwick and back in the same time?
So there's two separate things we want. Um, we want the Newcastle Morpeth trains to be extended onto Bedlington. And then in addition to that, we want another service, also hourly, to run from Newcastle to Berwick, which means that Cramlington, and remember Cramlington is Northumberland's largest town, gets at least two trains per hour each way. And the Newcastle Berwick trains would need to be electric trains just so they can keep up. It's to do with faster acceleration. So that's a different service to the service which would go from Newcastle to Morpeth round to Berwick, and we want to see reconnected back to Carlisle.
So one of my final questions is: what do the train operating companies serving the area need to do to improve the services and routes?
Well, I think to improve the routes, they do need to listen to what people such as myself are saying, and they need to more than listen, they need to actually do it. Because what I find with some of the train companies, the people who interface with me are saying, actually, this is a very credible idea, and we'll take this away and look at this. But then they get opposition from within their company, from the people they're trying to avoid talking to me. So I think they need to understand that groups such as ours, and we are a bit unusual, but we do have some, very sensible, viable suggestions. And the rail industry as a whole needs to have an appetite for growing its own business. And I particularly address that comment to Network Rail, who, their default position is there's a reason for not doing this, like we haven't got enough capacity. So what they should be saying is, well, this is how much it would cost to put more capacity in so we can do these things. And then it becomes a political decision as to whether that's how, government or local authority wants to spend the money available to it. But I do believe that improving public transport is a win for the economy, it boosts the economy, etc.
Well, especially if you think about it, when the Northern comes into Morpeth, it sits in the siding for like I think it's about half an hour each way.
And not only that, it sits in the siding and it receives complaints from the people who have the misfortune to live along the road. And actually, I think Northern really started taking what I was saying seriously when they got, hit by some of those complaints. The train sits in the siding with the engine running, and like residents are saying, why? And it's getting our washing dirty and all this sort of stuff. And I'm saying the answer is just send it on to Bedlington and then bring it back.
But proves the point. I live about half a mile from the train station, and I can hear the Northern units leaving Morpeth train station and going into the siding.
Can you? Yeah, yeah,
So if the noise if I can hear it from there, I can imagine what it's like for the residents living right next to it.
yeah. Hmm.
So, a couple more. Do we need to have more open access operators on the network, such as Lumo, Grand Central, Hull Trains?
Well, I think open access operators are a good idea. It does come back to the question of capacity. So, on the one hand, there needs to be capacity for what is going to effectively be Great British Railways want to do. But if they don't want to do something, then I think an open access operator should be allowed to do it. If they believe they can do it and make a profit from doing it and they're not taking away profit from some of the other companies, then it's a complete no-brainer to not let them do it. So in that sense, we support open access operators. There are risks with open access operators because they can change their minds. There's no kind of statutory accountability. They could just sort of say, "Oh no, we're giving up on this. Didn't work out or something." So we need the base service. So what we're seeing at the moment is LNER sort of saying, "Oh, we don't need to have so many trains stopping at Morpeth because there's an open access operator." Well, that is a completely disingenuous argument because the open access operators' trains are full to capacity. They typically have every seat on the train sold. So where the people who can no longer get on an LNER train are going to go, I don't know. And my worry about the new timetable is it will just result in more people flying because we're taking capacity away from stations like Morpeth and Berwick.
I was going to say Lumo is a really good example because if you think they set their company up, ordered 5 units, and run trips from London to Edinburgh. I've used Lumo myself quite a few times to a commuter college because it was convenient at the time. And I thought the service was impeccable, clean trains, fast trains. It normally got into more early, never mind running late.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's excellent that you've had that experience. And obviously, they have to set themselves up starting small, but we hope that they will now be able to expand. But equally, we want to work with the established operators, which are increasingly getting absorbed into, Great British Railways, and to make sure they are delivering a good service as well.
So how many companies are actually part of Great British Railways at this point?
Well, in our region, LNER, Northern, and Transpennine Express. They're not necessarily part of Great British Railways, but they're all owned ultimately by the DFT. When they
Yeah.
move across from the DFT into Great British Railways, I'm not entirely sure of how that's working out legally. Cross Country are still an independently franchised operator, and then of course Lumo are an open access operator.
So last couple from me. What is your favourite station that you visited?
Um, Well, it's difficult to say. I mean, what I would like to be my favourite station is Bedlington, but it isn't open yet. So I'm very much hoping if we talk again in a year's time, I'll be able to say Bedlington. Um, I think Morpeth is a very nice station. I think having the cafe at the station, big plug for the cafe here. I've got no financial interest in the cafe, but I do know the guy who owns it. But that has really lifted that station up into a much higher quality station, having the ticket office open, credit to Greater Morpeth Development Trust who redeveloped the building. They took charge of that project. It was SENRUG's idea actually to start off with, but Greater Morpeth Development Trust ran it. And we've got toilets, we've got station on the cafe. So that I really like. I can't think of any other station that comes near. Possibly there's some country stations on branch lines with nice cafes and things, but can't think of one at the moment.
And finally, what was your favourite ever rail journey that you've been on?
Well, I think my favourite journey, and I'll be a little bit cautious about saying this because actually the Morpeth to Edinburgh journey is really nice in terms of scenery. It's hugging the coast, but I also I love travelling on the line out of Exeter along the seawall through Dawlish towards Totnes. I think that is a great journey, and you can do that on a direct train from Morpeth, so that's a great plug there for cross country. But I kind of, I love going to Penzance by train along that route, and to actually see the waves, if the tide's in, literally a few feet away from the track, is superb.
Similar to the maybe the East Coast Main Line just above Berwick. like right next to the one on the
Yeah, and
coast there.
it's lovely. And one of my comments about rail travel in Northumberland is that the potential for tourism is underexploited. I think that about bus travel as well, actually. The buses are very good at going where people live, but they're not very good at going to where, people want to go for holiday, go walking and kind of walk 5 miles and get a bus back, that sort of thing. Whereas in other areas, such as Cornwall or such as the Lake District, the public
Yeah.
transport offer is much more closely aimed at the tourist and leisure market with a real desire to keep traffic off the roads. Some of the villages are quite congested, but we don't seem to have woken up to that thinking just at the moment.
Well, I actually had a railway timetable booked from the Lake District, and it was made by Northern, but it did also have all the stagecoach timetables in. Where that is
Yeah,
something that would be mint up here.
yeah, yeah. Well, we can't even get a printed timetable from Northern, but SENRUG might do one. So they might, particularly for the Northumberland line, when the last three stations are open, in cooperation with them, they're kind of providers uh, with the detail. I think from their point of view, I'm not really trying to criticise them. Fewer and fewer people are looking at printed timetables now. They've got to keep the cost down. But there's real problems with online timetables, actually, especially for longer trains. It's very difficult to see where the train started from and where it's going. So if
Uh,
you're waiting at Newcastle or something, and you're trying to go to I, I don't know, Gloucester or Cheltenham or somewhere, you want to know because the train is going to be announced as a Bristol train or a Plymouth train or a Penzance train, and you
Calling
need
out.
to know that information, and you just don't get it from online timetables. A software fix, I'm sure, would give it to you. Um, Also, if you're traveling somewhere and you're meeting someone who's going to get on the train halfway through, I'm sort of thinking, okay, so this is the 11:18 from Morpeth, but what time is this train at York? And it can be a bit of a
Uh,
difficult job to find out, especially with online timetables only ever giving you, in that sense, they give you the arrival time, which is not the departure time. So there is a case for printed timetables, but I can understand the rail industry's reluctance to do that.
well, I've got to say that's all from me. I really appreciate you doing this, and I hope we get
Okay,
to
well,
speak again
thank you.
soon.
It's been good to talk to you, and yeah, keep in touch.
So to everybody watching, thanks for watching. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one. Mag out.
Okay, thank you.
Done. Perfect.
All right. Well, I will now see if I can find the recording, and if so, I will send it to you on a WeTransfer link so you can download it because it will
That's
be too
perfect.
large to go via email. So hopefully, when I stop the call, which I should do now, so I'll say goodbye, but it will come up
Yes.
and tell me where it's recorded it to. Right. See you then.
See you. Bye.
Bye bye.